Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar, which has been brought to you by the advisory staff here in Teagasc Mayo. My name is Enda Geoghegan and I work in Teagasc Ballina, and I'm going to be your host tonight for the next hour. Now, tonight's webinar, we're going to concentrate on maximising use of fertilizer in 2022. And indeed, our first speaker, Cathal Conaty, who's based in Teagasc Claremorris, is going to talk to us about lime, which is often called forgotten fertilizer. And while our second speaker, Mark Plunkett, who's a plant and soil nutrient specialist based in Johnstown Castle, and he will cover getting the most from your fertilizer in 2022, and he'll also cover the relative value of fertilizer and also cover some slurry spreading advice and the use of the LESS, the low emission slurry spreading application methods. So now you, the viewers, are encouraged to participate tonight by asking questions using the questions and answers tab at the bottom of your screen. And later tonight, our manager here in Mayo will, Vivian Silke, will answer them questions after the two speakers have presented their presentations. So the webinar is being recorded and it is going to be available on the Teagasc Mayo YouTube channel in the next few days. And it's also available on Teagasc Mayo Facebook and also on the Twitter page. So without further ado, I would like to invite Cathal to begin sharing his presentation.
Thank you, Enda. Can you see that okay, Enda? Okay, so I presume Enda can see it there.
Yeah, that's perfect.
No, yeah, as Enda says, my name is Cathal Conaty and I'm a dry stock advisor in Teagasc in Claremorris. And today I'll be presenting lime, the forgotten fertilizer. So as we all know, the fertilizer price is increased dramatically, and so too we need to increase our efficiency with our fertilizer. So my colleague Mark Plunkett, he'll be covering spreading it in the right place, the right rate, and at the right time, while I'll be covering how to get a better response from your fertilizer through applying lime. So the optimum pH for soils. So the pH of soil is basically you're measuring how acidic your soils is. So the optimum for grassland soils is 6.3, and in high molybdenum cases it's below 6.2. So for nitrogen use efficiency, if we look at the chart there, we can see if we have a low pH soil and a low P and K index, we're at the minute we're getting 35% efficiency. So if we take for every 100 kgs of nitrogen, we're only getting 35 kg. Then by just fixing the pH, we're getting an 18% increase. So we're getting 53%, which will equate to 53 kgs in 100 kgs of nitrogen. At optimum there, if we have soil pH of 6.3 and we have our indexes at soil index P and K at 3, we're getting an optimum uses of 63% there. So then if we look at the lime usage, there's been a reduced lime usage over the last number of years. 65% of, or 65 to 70% of grassland farms are below the target index of 6.3. Nationally, lime is currently 50% of what it was in the 1980s. Although last year, I think with the derogation, farmers were obliged to put out fertilizer, so I think it was quite a high year as well. If we look at the key benefits of lime, grassland mineral soils release up to 80 kgs of nitrogen per hectare once restored to a soil index of 6.3. So that's basically free fertilizer sitting in your soil that's currently doing nothing. Maintaining the correct soil pH is critical for nutrient availability of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And lime will increase the production potential of acidic soils by at least 1 ton of grass dry matter. So there's different types of lime. So you have your standard grind limestone that comes from a quarry. It costs about €25 per ton. You can see it there below being spread in the field. It's quite a dusty lime. Then you have magnesium lime. It's a bit more rare. I think there's only four quarries in the country that are spreading or are providing magnesium limestone. Magnesium limestone, it's quite good on soils that are magnesium deficient, and high molybdenum soils because it has a slower releasing rate. Then if we look at the granulated lime, there's advantages to granulated lime and disadvantages. If you look down below there, that's the granulated lime. It's almost like a combined fertilizer. The advantages is it's fast acting. It's useful in a conic or situation because you get an immediate short-term response. It's useful on lime deficient soils before sowing tillage crops. It's spreadable by a fertilizer spreader. Granules do not blow away as easy as the dust. And it's best suited to a pH soil, which is good, and only a maintenance amount is required. And then if we look at the disadvantages, it's more expensive than ground limestone, and it needs quite a large application is required on low pH soils. So how much lime is needed on your farm? So to find this out, we need to take a look at the soil and the soil's fertility. And how we do that, we take soil samples. So if you look at we can take the soil samples every 4 to 5 years by walking through a field in a W fashion and taking soil cores. And the minimum interval between taking soil samples and liming is 2 years. So you just don't get a false positive or a false reading. So if we look down here, we can see our results from our lime or from our soil samples. We can look at the pH there. There's a pH there of 5.7, 5.9, and 5.8. And then if we look over the lime requirements, so that's each one of those soil samples or those fields need 5 ton of lime per hectare. So there's a handy wee equation at the bottom of your soil sample report where you can work that into old money by multiplying by 0.4. So in this case, 5 ton per hectare, if we multiply that by 0.4, we're getting 2 ton per acre. And then you can just multiply out your acres and you get your tonnage. So the timing of lime, so there's no best time to spread lime. You can graze it as soon as it's been washed in. So if you had a good shower of rain afterwards, you can start grazing. Sorry. 3 months is your requirement there for lime before cutting silage, and 3 to 6 months between if you spread lime first and then you spread urea or slurry. Although if you spread it, the lime, if you spread the slurry first, there's only a 10-day requirement there. There's no gap needed with protected urea can or compound fertilizers. And when it comes to reseeding, it's best to incorporate it into the soil into the seed bed at 5 to 10 centimeters. So not to deep plow it, just to incorporate it into your seed bed. Here's a molybdenum map. So this is where all the high molybdenum soils are in the country. If we high molybdenum soils, if we get our soil pH to above 6.2, we're going to release a lot of molybdenum in these high molybdenum soils, and that way the molybdenum attaches itself to the copper, and therefore it locks up the copper. And if the copper is locked, then if we have livestock in this situation, we're gonna leave our livestock copper deficient. So I wouldn't say not to spread limes on these farms. I would say contact your advisor to create a plan. Magnesium is as I said earlier, is a slower releasing fertilizer, so I would target it with magnesium. And when we take soil samples, the soil samples are cross-referenced with your area against the molybdenum map, and in that way we can figure out the soil samples come back with a lower recommended rate of lime. So the lime application. So generally, if you have a lime requirement over 7.5 tonne per hectare or 3 tonne to the acre, you should probably apply the bulk now and the remainder in 2 years. This is because over 7.5, it's not favorable in soils. So if you have a soil requirement of 10, you might spread 5 tonne now and 5 tonne later. On heavy soils, farmers often talk about it leaves the ground soft and possibly more liable to be poached. So we kind of go in with on these farms with a little and often approach. So if you had 3 tonne to the acre to apply, I would tell you to apply maybe 1.5 this year and follow up with 1.5 in 2 to 3 years. If you have to apply in a maintenance level, so what I mean by maintenance level, if you're at a soil pH of 6 or over, it's generally you spread probably about 20% of your farm per year. It's good practice. Then just to keep it maintained, then if your soil is 50 to 100% deficient on your farm, you should apply 50% now and 50% in year 3. So I just have 2 scenarios. Scenario 1, you have a soil pH of 6, and you can apply 2.5 tonne per hectare of ground limestone now, or you can hold off and retest and in 2 to 3 years. In this case, if you're going to hold off, generally if you're looking clover in your swords, I wouldn't hold off. I would go ahead with the 2.5 tonne per hectare now. If you're going with the granulated lime, it's done at whenever it's a maintenance level, it's a ratio of 1:3. So if you take the 2.5 tonne per hectare and divide that by 3, you're going to get 833 kgs of lime granulated lime per hectare, or 6.7 bags per acre. This can be spread in single application or a split application. So we can just take a look at across here is the costings of that. So ground limestone, as I said earlier, it costs €25 per tonne. This works out that rate at €12.5 per hectare. Granulated lime, it's €150 per tonne roughly, and that's costing you about €25 per hectare. So it's working out probably about twice as expensive to spread this in granulated lime. So scenario 2 is a build-up situation. We have a soil pH of 5.5, and the price we're given on this farm is 7.5 tonne per hectare. So you can either spread all now, or you can spread 5 tonne now and apply the remainder 2.5 in 2 years' time. Thank you very much for listening. The main advice I'd give you is to reduce your fertilizer bill. Get in contact with your Teagasc advisor today and come up with a lime program for your farm.
Thanks very much, Cathal. And I just get you maybe to stop sharing there. Now tonight we're going to have a poll which will be taking place after Mark Plunkett's presentation. So you'll be invited to answer 6 questions in a poll, and I would encourage everybody to participate in that. The poll will flash up on your computer screen or on your phone, and it's just a simple method of just clicking the appropriate answer. I'd also encourage people to use the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. Vivian Silke will be manning these questions after Mark Plunkett's presentation. So I would encourage, if there's any questions there, to use the chat function at the bottom of your screen or at the bottom of your phone screen. And we'll handle these questions after Mark Plunkett's presentation. So Mark, I'd invite you there. You have the screen up, so you can go ahead there, Mark. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Enda. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for inviting me to speak here this evening on the whole area of fertilizers. The title of my presentation this evening is Making Best Use of Applied Nutrients in 2022. I think we've got a great start with Cathal. Definitely the starting point is lime in order to increase fertilizer efficiency and also to unlock soil nutrients, as Cathal has told us. So definitely when it comes to spending money in 2022, lime is a super investment, and it will also increase the efficiency of bag fertilizer as well, and also increase the efficiency of the release of soil nutrients and also the nutrients in our organic manures. So, okay, so look, I say, look, fertilizer prices have increased dramatically in the last 6 to 8 months. And I suppose I just have what's happened since, I suppose, April of last year. You can see CAN there was trading somewhere around 235 a tonne. And unfortunately, today that's somewhere around 710 euros. There's nearly a 3-fold increase, driven by a lot of, I suppose, external factors to Ireland. You know, there's a lot going on in the world, and especially around energy. And energy has, has got very tight in supply and has got very, very expensive, and is one of the key drivers, especially for the nitrogen component in our fertilizers. P's and K's have also increased. They've doubled in price. So you can see the likes of our 18612 was costing somewhere around 340 a tonne last April, and today we're looking at somewhere in the ballpark of 745 per tonne. So there has been a big increase, as we're all well aware. And I suppose, look, as I was saying there, in terms of the cost per kilo, nitrogen has taken the biggest jump. It's sort of gone 3-fold. Our P's and K's have doubled in price, and look, they are, I suppose, relatively good value, even though they are expensive. Like, if we pick out some of the products like CAN, it's worth somewhere around 602 per tonne, and it's costing us 710. Urea, again, it's costing us 930, and its relative value is about 1,025. So urea as a source of nitrogen is probably the best value in terms of nitrogen out there at the minute. In terms of, I suppose, the products that we'll be using on the grassland side of the house, if you look at 18612, I was saying it's costing somewhere around 745, and its relative value is 793. So again, it's expensive, but it's reasonably good value for money, and maybe it's one to consider in the current year, in terms of from a nitrogen point of view, and also getting your P's and K's there at reasonably good value as well. I suppose other products there that we'd be familiar with is like some maybe say pasture sward 27.255. It's costing 815 in the market at the minute, and its relative value is 765. So it tends to be an expensive way, and I suppose what's driving that is the cost of nitrogen in that compound as we speak as well. So look, that's I suppose where we are in terms of fertilizer prices, and indications is that fertilizer prices will remain strong, over the next number of months. Okay, so again, like, what can we do in the current year? And like most important is having up-to-date soil analysis. So again, it's a very small cost. Soil sample is costing about 50 cents per acre per year. And it's very, very important to establish, especially if you haven't taken soil samples in the last 3 to 4 years. Now is a great time to get, some soil samples on to get an update on soil pH and also P's and K's. So this will allow us to plan, to create a fertilizer plan for lime, organic fertilizers and chemical fertilizers. So again, that's most important in the current year, to figure out what's our lime requirement, or what fields in the farm need lime, as Cathal has told us, and the importance of it, and also which fields will benefit most from organic fertilizers like cattle slurry, farmyard manure. And maybe we should be considering maybe an alternative source. Is there a piggery? Is there an intensive livestock farmer close to you that, would like you to, or would like to maybe export some slurry source of NP and K in the current year? And also index 4s. There's approximately about 20 to 25% of our soils at index 4, which are very fertile. So these fields should not be receiving P and K in the current year, as they have a sufficient supply, to grow as much grass as you want in the current year. So again, I say very, very important to get your soils tested and figure out where you are around the major nutrients. I don't know, Enda, whether this one is going to be an option for you, but look, it's
Mark, sorry there for a second.
Sorry, yes.
Have you your VPN on by any chance, Mark? It's just that sometimes maybe it's your Wi-Fi.
No, it's this. It could be my Wi-Fi. Sorry, Enda.
That's okay. Could be my Wi-Fi. Keep going. It's not too bad. Just sometimes you're coming in and out, but you're not too bad. Thanks, Mark. Sorry.
Okay, sorry, Enda. Okay, so I have up there why protected urea. So again, protected urea, it's a very efficient form of nitrogen, and it reduces agricultural emissions, such gases as ammonia and nitric oxide. But most importantly, in the current year, it's a cheaper form of nitrogen. Like protected urea is 20% lower cost than likes of a can-based fertilizer. So if you take can, I've been at €700 per ton, it's costing $259. Protected urea, I've been at $950 per ton, it's costing $206 a kilo. So again, look, maybe it's something to consider if you can source it in your area, that, and from a nitrogen perspective, it is 20% cheaper. And, that's quite significant in the current year. Another big advantage of protected urea is that it grows more grass. Research from Johnstown Castle, 6 out of the 7 years, protected urea is growing 13% more grass than ordinary urea. And again, very, very consistent. The only year where there was an inconsistency was 2018 during the drought. So you have more effective N, and in effect, you can reduce your of grass production. So that's another benefit of protected urea, especially when fertilizer prices are so high. Okay, so I suppose just maybe let's talk about, how do we get the most from the nutrients that we apply as either bag fertilizer or organic fertilizers, as in cattle slurry. So soil temperature is very, very important. So that's the first, I suppose, requirement in terms of grass growth. So we need at least 5.5 degrees, and our soils are somewhere around that at the minute, you know what I mean, in the last few days, but we need that consistently over a number of days. So 5.5 degrees. The second thing is good field conditions. Okay, so again, field conditions again are improving over the last week or 10 days. So soils are drying out and they are improving. And also forecast. So again, what's the weekly forecast? So have we a good forecast ahead if we spread fertilizer or spread slurry? And the final piece of information, the jigsaw, I would say to you, that you need, good grass growth rates. And again, grass growth rates are actually quite low at the minute. They're somewhere around between 3 and 5 kilos based on pasture base. Now, the expectation for the week is that they will increase to maybe 6-7 kilos. So there is a small demand for nutrient there at the minute. Like, for example, at the moment our grass needs about 1.5 kilos of nitrogen per week to grow. And at the moment, soils will supply that. So again, it's still relatively early, but over the coming weeks, conditions will be improving. And again, where you are considering going with slurry, or bag fertilizer, again, it's very important that you pick the driest fields and you have all these conditions, right as well. But it's still relatively early, as grass growth is quite low. Today now was a bright day here in the southeast, but up to this, the days have been quite cloudy and little sunshine. So that's probably that's a very, very important thing, that conditions are right at the time of application. Okay, I'll just turn to maybe slurry. So again, slurry now is a very valuable source of NP and K, and again, a valuable resource in order to reduce the impact to a degree, in terms of the high fertilizer prices. But less technology, so the low emission slurry spreading techniques, they are increasing on the ground. There is more trailing shoes or band spreaders now. Around the country, and contractors are also investing in the technology. But I suppose the benefits there, the big one is that it reduces nitrogen losses. So again, we're placing that slurry in a narrow band, either beneath the grass or quite close to the grass, and that reduces the surface area, and that reduces the losses of ammonia. And in effect, we're recovering more nitrogen from our slurry. So in the springtime, when you switch from splash plate to trailing shoe or band spreader, we're recovering 3 units of nitrogen more per 1,000 gallons. And this is the _1 technology in terms of reducing agricultural emissions. It will reduce our emissions by about 60%. And then protected urea is the second technology. So these two technologies rolled up together will reduce our ammonia emissions by about 80%, and will reach our ammonia target there, as agriculture is the main emitter of ammonia in the country. Again, it's a very, it's a modern way of spreading slurry. There's no odors, no smells. So that's back to the ammonia reduction, retaining more nitrogen. A big thing there is that you get a very precise application of the nutrients across the spread width. So you're getting a very even distribution, and you're placing the nutrients, exactly where they need to go in terms of the grass plant, close to the soil, close to the root system. So you're getting a very even delivery of the NP and K across the spread width, and there's a benefit there. And actually, that was one of the biggest drivers on the continent, was the precision of application when they moved. They've moved over 25 years ago from splash plate to trailing shoe or band spreaders. That was the main reason. Another big benefit of the low emission slurry spreading or trailing shoe is that we can apply into heavier grass covers. And again, there is good covers of grass out there from the mild autumn that we've had. So again, that's another big benefit, that you're not spoiling all the grass, and there's a quicker return to grazing. Also, which will be very helpful as well, is that you can have better soil conditions. So you can delay the application of slurry until conditions are better to take, the equipment in terms of your spreader and your tractor, because you can spread into the higher grass covers. So in effect, this is widening the window in the springtime for the application of slurry and utilizing those nutrients, and especially the nitrogen part. That's probably the part. The P and K is relatively stable, but to recover that nitrogen, on my previous slide, we need to have the good conditions. We need to be going into rising soil temperatures, longer days, and the demand is increasing by the grass crop as well. So look, I would strongly advise you to consider less in 2022. Maybe talk to your local contractor and seize the technology available for us to make, and you to make, better use of the nutrients in that slurry. In terms of putting some values on it, like, if we go buy a bag of fertilizer, we know it's 18,612 or 10,1020, and I think that's where we need to go with our cattle slurry as well. We need to figure out what's in it. So again, the standard, I suppose, value for cattle slurry is 6% dry matter. It contains 9 units of nitrogen, 5 units of phosphorus, and 32 units of potassium. So that's the available. 1,000 gallons is like a bag of 9,532. If we get dilution with water, which happens, it dilutes the nitrogen, the P and the K. So again, typically on a dairy farm, we'd have a lot of maybe more dilute slurry because of parlour washings and yard washings. And again, it will be like a 6,321. So look, there can be a big variation out there in the ground. And again, water is a big factor, but I would encourage you to test your slurry. It'll cost anywhere from 50 to 100 euros to get a sample tested. Just be careful taking it out, make sure it's agitated slurry, but I'd strongly encourage you to get a house or two tested in the current year to see what's in your slurry, and to see what's its fertilizer value. So it will allow you then to adjust the application rate based on its NPK content. Okay, so the question often comes up is, where should I spread slurry on my farm? So again, based on its nutrient profile on the left-hand side here, you can see the majority of the nutrient values in the P and the K. There's something like 80% of its fertilizer value is in P and K, and about 20% in the nitrogen form. So again, based on soil analysis, we should be targeting this slurry to the lower index fields, your index 1s, your index 2s. That's where you're going to get the best bang for your buck, or the biggest response. You'll get the utilization of all the nutrients, not alone the nitrogen, but the P and the K. So again, it's very much back to talking to your local advisor and putting a fertilizer plan together. And we should be keeping enough slurry back for our silage ground. So it's very, very important in the current year, with nutrients being so expensive, that we target, or we ensure that we have enough slurry reserves for our silage ground. You know what I mean? That this is where the slurry came from, and this is where it should go back to. So you're recycling your slurry back onto your silage fields, and it has the right balance of P and K as well, because we need a ratio of 1:6, in terms of phosphorus to potassium, and that's what's in your cattle slurry. And again, as I was saying to you there, very important to adjust the application rate based on the quality or the nutrient loading of that slurry. Okay, to move on to the grazing side of the house. So again, look, I've put a slide together here. I've taken a stocking rate somewhere around 130 kilograms of organic N per hectare. And in 2022, with the expensive fertilizer, we're encouraging you to apply offtakes. So this is index 3. So these are the rates here that we're encouraging you to apply. Index 3 is optimum fertility. So depending on where you are, if you're a high index 3, we'll be saying a half a bag of 18612 plus nitrogen. If you're a low index 3, a full bag of 18612 plus nitrogen. And then at index 1 and 2, again, a bag of 18612 plus your nitrogen as well. And we're talking there, nitrogen somewhere in the region of 60 to 80 kilograms per hectare, or 50 to 65 units per acre. And again, we're only recommending this for 1 year, to just apply maintenance levels, just to maintain fertility and maintain production because of the high fertilizer prices. And we'll be strongly encouraging them to go back in 2023 and resample those fields where we have reduced the application of fertilizer. Silage ground, a very, very important crop. And again, very, very important that we plan our silage ground and we make sure to make enough good quality silage for the winter ahead. Now, silage ground, again, we're recommending to apply offtakes. So what NPK you need to grow the crop in the current year. So again, this is the advice here. 100 kilograms of N per hectare, that's 80 units per acre. 20 kilos of P, that's 16 units, and 100 kilos of K, that's 100 units per acre for your first cut silage. So the strategy there will be to apply, 3,000 gallons or 33 cubic meters per hectare of good quality slurry will supply the majority of your P and K. And again, your nitrogen source then, protected urea is good value, and it's a cheaper source of nitrogen. So protected urea to 38%, plus 6% sulfur. Okay, if you haven't got slurry in the mix, again, consider a fertilizer, something like a 13-620. And again, you're talking 3.5 bags to the acre of a 13-620, or something like 3.5 bags to the acre of a 16-520, somewhere in that ballpark. And again, balance it up then with maybe 30-40 units of nitrogen. So that would be the strategy, and I'd strongly encourage you to be targeting your slurry really to those fields, and then balancing it up with sufficient nitrogen in order to get a good crop of grass silage. So Enda, in summary then, I would strongly recommend that, there's still time there to take fresh soil samples, to get soil samples done, to figure out where we are around lime, P and K, so we can complete a farm fertilizer plan and plan our fertilizer requirements for the next number of months. So figure out, how much nitrogen we need, and then how much 18612, do we need extra fertilizer for our silage ground. Again, very, very important to apply slurry and fertilizers under the right conditions. So again, put it out when we're going to get the best response to that nutrient. And also consider less the low emission spreading technology to get more value out of your slurry in 2022. And very, very important, plan and make sure that you have sufficient slurry for your silage fields, because it's the crop that you will see the best return on from that slurry in the current year. And one final one there, Enda, just to say that today the Teagasc and the Minister for Agriculture launched a technical support pack for farmers. It's called Soils, Nutrients and Fertilizer Fact Sheets. There's 20 fact sheets in there. And again, it's available on the Soil and Soil Fertility website, and there's an example of one of the fact sheets there online. So this is very, very valuable information in the current year. So thank you very much, and we can take any questions there now, Enda.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mark. Just before we go into the questions there, I'd just like to invite Brendan Garry there to join us. He's going to launch the poll, as I previously said there. So Brendan, maybe you'd like to explain to us about the poll there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Enda, and good evening to all our listeners. So, look, we've had two brilliant presentations there from Cathal and from Mark, and I suppose, look, we want to try and figure out, what are your thoughts for 2022? Are you going to change your practices, and are you going to try and make the best use of fertilizer? So, we're going to run a live interactive poll for a few minutes. We have 5 questions that we want to get your views on, and these questions, will be popping up on your screen, and we will explain the questions now in a moment's time. Okay, so we're just going to launch this poll, and it should be popping up on your screen, and then later this evening we'll just share the results with you. So that should be just popping up there in front of your screens right now. And the first question there is, do you intend on purchasing the same quantity of fertilizers in 2022? So again, that's either a yes or a no answer there for that. So we'd encourage you there now to start answering those questions. Answer yes or no, depending on that question. The second question there is, do you spread your own slurry in 2021? So did you complete your own slurry applications in 2021, or did you get a contractor to do it? So now the third question there we have is, do you intend to use low emission slurry systems in 2022? And indeed, we heard some great comments there from Mark, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions there in the questions and answers relating to low emission slurry systems. So just to explain, the low emission slurry systems there, that's the trailing shoe, the injector system, or the dribble bar, or indeed maybe you stuck with the traditional systems off the splash plate. So there's lots of answers coming in there. The fourth question there that we have tonight is, did you intend to apply lime in 2022? And indeed, we know that this is certainly going to help with nitrogen efficiency, and Cathal gave us a great presentation on the value of lime and indeed the importance of it. So, do you intend to apply lime this year to try and get the best value of your fertilizers? We also have a last question there, which is, do you intend to purchase protected urea in 2022? And we know that this is a very, very important fertilizer. It's a coating that's applied to the normal urea. It's a little bit dearer, but has huge benefits in terms of environmental benefits there, in terms of reducing overall greenhouse gases. And Mark, gave some great information there relating to it. So look, we leave the poll running for another moment or two. We'd encourage you there. There's over half the viewers tonight have voted. The votes are flying in. So I'll just fly up again to this first question again. Did you intend to purchase the same quantity of fertilizers this year as you did for last year? Certainly look at, we know, and Mark showed us the prices there. Did you, spread your own slurry in 2021? So, lots of you there, I can see there, are showing yes, and a lot are showing no. Do you intend to use low emission slurry systems in 2022? So that's, I'm sure, going to be hotly debated in the questions and answers in a few moments. Do you intend to apply lime this year to help with nitrogen efficiency? Again, so we can see, again, over 70% at this stage now of the viewers have voted. So we're getting great response there, interaction this evening. And finally, just to recap again on the fifth question, do you intend to purchase protected urea in 2022? So, at this stage now, you should all have an opportunity to have voted. We might just leave it running for another minute or two, but maybe in the meantime, Enda, I'll minimize the screen and I'll hand it over to you again, and Vivian, and Cathal, and I'll just come back again at the end with the results, and I'll with Enda. So over to you now again, Enda.
Thanks very much, Brendan. I think it's like being in the Eurovision with all them votes coming in. I'd just like to, at this stage, hand over there to Vivian, and there's loads of questions coming in there in the questions and answers tab, and I would encourage people to continue on with typing in the questions, and we'll get Mark and Cathal to field them. So Vivian, I'll hand over to you at this stage.
Thanks, Enda, and good evening, viewers. Just before I launch into the questions, folks, it's very important that ye as farmers that are on this webinar this evening, actually, if you want to spread protected urea, you must ask your local suppliers, your Revo co-ops, your local co-ops, your merchants, whatever. If you don't ask for it, it won't become available. And there seems to be a little bit of reluctance from some suppliers to actually source the protected urea this year because of the cost, both to them and the higher cost to you as farmers. But I would urge you at this stage, if you're going to use it, especially guys that are highly stocked and maybe need grass for early lemon ewes, for cows going out to grass, dairy cows, suckler cows as well, that now is the time to ask your merchants if you want to use it. And you saw the economics of it that Mark presented, which were quite clear to me anyway. And you know, ask for it now. If you ask for it, the merchants, the suppliers will get it in stock and it'll be available for you, and you'll be doing the environment a favour as well. So I won't say any more about that. And I suppose the poll that Brendan went through there, some of those statements are reflected in the poll as well. So we'll recap of those at the end. So we've plenty of time for questions, and there's plenty of questions coming in. So I'm just going to go to Cathal first there. One question, Cathal, that came in. It's somewhat related to the line that you spoke about, but it's kind of a general question. We'll start off with any. So I think it's more related to reseeding than actual lime itself. But the question is, do you need to burn off after silage if you want to reseed in the stitching format?
Yeah. So if you're so it's a reseeding question. Yeah. So if you're using
the guttler or the stitching, the guttler is what it's commonly known as a stitching machine. Do you need to burn off after silage for that cow?
Generally, yeah. Normally you would go and burn off the old pasture, and especially if there's a lot of old grasses there. Well, first of all, I tell you to fix your soil fertility, especially in the webinar when we're talking about soil fertility and reseeding for soil fertility. If you don't have your soil fertility right, you're not going to get your successful reseed. So focus on your soil fertility. When it comes closer to that, there, burn off your old pasture and your weeds, and come in with a fresh start. Yeah.
And just at the moment, because I know traveling around the county the last couple of weeks with the weather quite dry and ground conditions good, there has a lot of lime gone out. Should you spread lime on all your farm, or do you revert to the soil samples, Cathal?
Definitely refer to your soil samples. If your soil sample is taken, that's the best advice. It's tailored to your farm. Definitely go with whatever your advisor is telling you as well. Each farm is different. I would tend to say maybe go with your pastures. Definitely go with your pastures now. It's great weather to get out. Generally say 3 months before cutting silage to have your lime out. So I would be rushing to get your silage ground to get limed now if you're liming it now, just so it doesn't go back into your silage pit, because you can come up with implications there, you know.
The final question for the moment, Cathal, is a question from a viewer here. Is there a greater lime requirement when maybe you get the use of pig slurry, as Mark alluded to in his presentation? The fact that fertilizer has gone so dear this year that you can hopefully get a pig slurry or cattle slurry from an intensive farmer nearby, and does that I suppose put pressure on the system, and you need more lime for that?
No, generally I think your lime requirements should stay the same based on your soil analysis. You should be spreading the same amount of lime. I don't think it should affect anything based on the slurry you get. I think you should stick with the same lime advice on that.
Yeah,
Maybe Mark can come in.
Yeah, that's correct, Cathal. There's actually a little bit of work done in Johnstown Castle where they're looking at urea. There was, I suppose, a theory or a myth there that if you use urea, it increased the soil acidity, Vivian, but from the work from Johnstown Castle, they don't see any effect from the ammonium-based fertilizer. And I would say the same for the big slurry, the cattle slurry. It's ammonium or ammonia, so it shouldn't have any effect on pH. And again, your soil test will pick that up, once every 4 or 5 years.
Thanks, Mark. So just one final question, and I'm not sure the answer. Maybe you can shine light on it, Cathal. Is there? You mentioned the magnesium lime. Is there one actually in the west of Ireland? Are you aware?
I think that might be a question for Enda there. Maybe he's a bit more based to the area. I don't know.
Mark, I'll throw that over.
Yeah, that's no bother. And Yeah, no, we don't. Well, see, there's 4 magnesium quarries in the country, and there's 3 of them in the southeast here in the Cartletkenny region. There's 1 in Cork. But like, you know, even though it mightn't be marketed as magnesium, it may be marketed as calcium. There will be some magnesium in that lime and Vivian. So maybe, like, you know, if you talk to the lime supplier, you know what I mean, the chances are that it won't be pure calcium. So there will be a little bit of magnesium in there, like, you know. It won't be, you know, so.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Seeing as you have the mic at the minute, Mark, don't want to answer this question all at once, but a few different viewers have asked this one. Why is the big increase in fertilizer prices upon us this year?
Yeah, look,
you can take your time answering that one.
Yeah, look, I suppose it's mainly driven by energy. You know, mainly driven by natural gas. There's a shortage of it in Europe. Europe is producing less natural gas than it did in the past. Some of the gas fields are coming to an end, and also Russia. There's not the same amount of gas coming, and that's one of the big drivers of price. I suppose also we have a world economy recovering from COVID. We have Brexit. We've also sanctions from the likes of Russia and China, you know, which are big exporters into the Irish market or into the world market for potash. There's also issues in Belarus around potash. So there's a lot of things going on that has driven the price of, you know, both nitrogen and P's and K's, but is very much around energy. There's also a switch from fossil fuels, Vivian, to more cleaner fuels, and that's driving the whole energy thing as well. And I say it's gone on since about last May, you know what I mean, especially the whole gas thing is going on. And you know, that has nearly drove fertilizer price to where it is. Like we're all our fertilizer comes in on a boat. We are importing everything. We don't produce any fertilizers as we know. So them are the main drivers of the price at you know, currently.
Not crystal ball gaze too much, Mark, but is this likely to wait with us for a couple of years? Is fertilizer going to remain high, and do we need to, you know, get off the dependency of it to an extent?
It's a good question, and you would love to know what's going to happen in the next 12 months, and even down the road further. But I suppose it's very much back to energy, and I suppose Europe becoming more, I suppose, self-sufficient in energy. You know what I mean? Because the production of fertilizer is a big energy user. Like, you know, ammonium, all nitrogen fertilizers, you know, natural gas is 80% of the cost of producing it, and that's the big one. So I suppose it's very much a balance coming back on a global scale around the whole area of energy, around fertilizer price.
A couple of different people again have asked this question, Mark, and they were popular a number of years ago. They probably make a recurrence again. The inoculants or the additives that some people are selling to add to slurry to make it work better for you. Is there any research done in Johnstown or any place else within Teagasc to evaluate these products? There's many different types. They're not cheap. And they need to be added over different periods over the winter to the static tank and the slurry inside it. Any light you can shine on that question, Mark?
Yeah, there has been work, Vivian, done in Johnstown Castle, both on the chemical additives, as in the likes of sulfuric acid or alum, those type of products. Now they do work from an emissions point of view, from an ammonia point of view, and a methane point of view. There also has been work done on the biologicals. And unfortunately they haven't, you know, they're questionable. They haven't shown the same effect in terms of reducing emissions. There was 4 products tested, and there was only 1 product that reduced ammonia by 10%. So I suppose it's hard to justify them, to be honest, like, you know what I mean, from an emissions point of view. Now the slurry does look different, and a lot of the slurry doesn't produce a crust, but you know, it's hard to, I suppose, find the benefit of them at this point in time.
Okay, so basically you're saying that it might appear different, but the actual value of the nutrients within the slurry, you haven't found a significant increase by using these products when you spread it?
No.
Okay, that's fair enough. Okay. Just going down to the questions here now. Any information, I suppose this is where the question's coming from, that the department launched a scheme last back end to soil sample a lot of the countryside, and I know a lot of our advisors in the region would have put names forward. What's the progress with that project, Mark, that you may be aware of?
It's a good question. I know they're sampling as we speak. I know they're out there on the ground. And to be honest, that's nearly as much as I know. Vivian, I haven't heard where they are in terms of numbers or anything like that.
I know there was a big interest in it nationwide, and a lot of farmers were turned down. It was an opportunity to avail of some free soil sampling, but a lot of farmers tended to be the smaller ones that were actually turned down and put on a waiting list for possibly next year. But that's a work in progress, so we're not just aware of the update on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Just going over the questions here now again. Back to you, Cathal, and I'm not just sure the answer to this one. Maybe you can shine light on it. Is there any potential risk from importing slurry in terms of TB and possibly bring it onto your own farm?
I don't know. Maybe Mark will have to answer that one, but definitely not from if you're taking it in from a poultry or a pig farm, you'll be okay there. TB from as far as I know, it could be spread in the dung, but I think if you keep it long enough, if you took an approach that where you're avoiding that field maybe for a short time after spreading the slurry, I think you should be okay. Now it should be washed into the ground, and the pathogenic bacteria should go away. But if anybody else wants to come in on that one, I'm not 100% certain on that.
I never heard anything about it, so I'd say it's because I suppose when you're importing anything, there is risks, but maybe just check out the source farm beforehand, and if you're unsure about it, maybe talk to your veterinary surgeon and maybe seek his advice. But it's like anything, we'll say if you're importing slurry, make sure you have all the paperwork right and all that kind of thing as well. And just on the health side of things, maybe just talk to your veterinary surgeon. He might be in a better place to advise you on that.
Okay. Mark, I'll combine these two questions into one because they're related. Will slurry need dilution for the LESS spreading, the less spreading, and also any tips to stop the nozzles of the new slurry spreaders from blocking up?
Yeah, that's a good question, Vivian. Dilution will be a help. It will be easier on the machine. It'll increase the flowability of the slurry through the machine. So yes, and maybe it's the year for us to be diluting our slurries to make them go further. Like by diluting the slurry, we actually increase the nitrogen efficiency, even though we reduce it, but the nitrogen becomes more efficient in that slurry from the dilution. In terms of the blockages, look, I think the slurry has to be right. It has to be well agitated. That's what the contractors are saying, guys that are had a long number of years. What I have even come across is that I even have come across one contractor. He actually has a box, it's like a filter, Vivian, that, you know what I mean, that he just puts on the line that when he's sucking it into the tank.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
and it's like a big filter with big a mesh and big holes in it, and it gathers things like bits of pallets,
bits of
plastic, twine, bits of wire, or you know, anything like that. But the slurry has to be conditioned. It has to be well agitated. I know you can have a macerator, an inlet macerator, which will give you a further chop, which will be a help. But yes, dilution and having your slurry in good condition will make life easier when it comes to spreading it. I suppose the brand spreader may be a little bit of a help over the trail and shoot, possibly, you know, in terms of possibly from the blockages. You know, that's
and just one final question related to slurry for the moment, Mark, is at what rate would you apply slurry for grazing ground using the trailing shoe? Do you have to adjust versus maybe what you're used to with the splash plate?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose it's very much down to the time of the year. Like as I was saying, at the minute, the demand for nitrogen out there in a growing sward of grass is about 1.5 kilos. So again, as the conditions improve, like there's a lower demand, I suppose, in the first 3 months of the year. So I'd imagine anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 gallons, Vivian. Like if you think every cubic meter, you know, will supply about 1 kilo of nitrogen. So if we go with say 15 cubic meters or 1,500 gallons per acre, that will give us, you know, 15 kilos of nitrogen or 12 units per per acre. So I'd imagine on the grazing ground, let's say anything from 1,500 to 2,500 gallons will give you anything from 12 to 20 units of nitrogen, which will be sufficient to grow grass in, I suppose, this early window.
Okay, thanks, Mark. The last question, which I'll deal with myself because I've been taking a few the last couple of weeks, and we'll hand back to Brendan then and Enda to give us the results of the poll and to conclude the evening. When soil samples are taken, how long until you receive the results? I just sent off a few right after Christmas, so about the 3rd, 4th January, and the results just came back yesterday. So normally it would be about a 2-week turnaround, but the labs are extremely busy this year because an awful lot of people are taking soil samples. So you're talking there about a 23, 24 day turnaround, so about 3 weeks. And it could get even longer as more soil samples come in. And also, how many acres per sample is a typical question. We would say for grassland, somewhere between 10 to 12 acres at maximum. So every 10 acres, every 10 to 12 acres, take your sample. How much does it cost? Teagasc cost €25 per sample for clients, and there's other organisations doing soil samples as well, and they have different costs. So that's in around what it is. As Mark said, I think in his presentation, the soil sample itself, the cost is 50 cents, I think, per acre per year. So relative to the price of manure, especially this year, it's very, very cheap, and it needs to be done on all farms if it hasn't been done for the last number of years. And people are coming out of the woodwork. A man asked me over Christmas to take soil samples farm, and he hasn't taken them in living memory in his farm. So obviously the price of fertilizer has focused his mind. So with that, and thanks for all the questions, I'll hand back to both Brendan and Enda to conclude the evening.
Okay, thanks very much, Vivian. Brendan, I'll get you maybe to share the results of the poll.
Perfect, Enda. Thank you very much there. And indeed, we've had a great response this evening. Almost 80% of our viewers this evening, and we have a large number, over 100 farmers tonight were logged on. So just to recap the questions again and what responses we've got from them. So at the moment, we can see there that there was 81% of farmers of you that were on tonight indicate to us that you will purchase less fertilizer than you did last year. The second question there was, did you spread your own slurry in 2021? And 65% of you either engage in a neighbour or a contractor. So that's, that's an interesting figure as well. Do you intend to use low emission slurry systems in 2022? And that came back at a dead heat at 50% each. So clearly, look at a lot of people engaging already in low emission slurry systems, and that's great to see figures like that coming. Mark and Cathal also spoke about lime and the importance of it, and we can see there tonight that 76% of you, the viewers at home tonight, indicate that you will spread lime in 2022. So that's a positive. 3 in every 4 of you tonight intend to spread lime. And lastly, I suppose Vivian mentioned about protected urea. 59% of you tonight indicate that you will hope to purchase protected urea in 2022. So look, that's just a quick survey, and indeed, look at we will hopefully have further surveys and further webinars in the weeks ahead. So I'm now going to hand it over to you, Enda, to conclude the proceedings for this evening.
Thanks very much, Brendan. And look, at this stage, I'd just like to thank all our panelists, Cathal, Mark Plunkett joining us from the sunny south east. Thanks very much, Mark. And Vivian for handling the questions, and indeed Brendan for doing the poll. I think the poll is something that really added value to it, and it's great to see it there. And just to remind people that we'll be here the same time next week in the spring dairy management, and we'll be joined by Donald Kelly and also a representative from Arrivo. So Lucas, I'd like to thank everybody. Thank you, the viewers, for tuning in and for your engagement in tonight. And indeed, thank you for completing the poll. So from us here tonight in County Mayo, thank you and stay safe out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye, folks.